Welcome everybody. Today we're gonna be talking about the King's Indian, and before we dive right into the games that I prepared, I gotta make a big disclaimer. King's Indian works against pretty much everything except the move pawn to e4. On e4 you'll have to learn like a Caro-Kann on the side or other opening, but in case white plays anything other than that, you can go ahead and use the opening that I'm about to show you in this video. So without any more introduction, let's dive right into the games. Alright everybody, we're back. 2150 opponent, GJ Wang, going for the very aggressive Queen's Gambit kind of setup. I mean, all in all, it's just a d4 mainline, and we're gonna be going for the King's Indian, and oh man, we do get the aggressive setup. Alright, let's see. I'm gonna start with d6 and then castle. And he goes for knight f3. Obviously, many options for white, but knight f3 is the most common move. And by the looks of it, he seems to be a principled classical player, expecting bishop e2. Okay, bishop e2 on the board. Wow! Alright, bishop e2. So we got ourselves into the Mar del Plata. Now, in this position, e5 is by far the most common move. I could play it. It's what, Kasparov and Bobby Fischer have played while popularizing this opening. But why would you follow these greats when you can play it like your favorite stupid YouTuber? Queen e8, my pet line. My key move to avoid a lot of fury. And the idea is to play for e5 and, well, first of all, we avoid all the queen trade lines that are quite drawish and annoying. And after e5, the only move to play for an advantage as white is to take, which is not easy at all. And even those are leading to very complex positions. So most white players go d5. That is proven by stats, also my experience. I play this position a lot. They go d5 all the time. Now, the nice thing about this is that, well, white normally in the Mar del Plata really wants to keep playing with flexible moves, like let's say a rook e1 or a queen c2. But the problem is that against both, like rook e1, you can take and then pick up the e4 pawn. And queen c2, similar common mistake online, yeah? You take and then there is knight e4 trick. And after knight e4, there is bishop takes on d4, picking up the undefended knight. So white really has to pretty much commit to this. Also, bishop e3, he cannot keep the tension for the same reason of takes. And once he commits, you get to fix the queen side before white gets any interesting push. So he really just wants to expand and play c5, but we have very important key move, a5. That is why I did all this foreplay, delaying telling you the move. a5 is very important, controlling all these squares and preparing knight a6. And once we make sure that we have managed to slow down white's play on the queen side, well, then you know you have, we have all the time in the world to attack white on the king side. So, just a quick pro tip before we advance this. Based on the pawn chain really tells us where to play. It's pointing towards that side, so you can set up this little triangle, and also white's pawn chain is pointing this way. So they're gonna try to play in the red triangle with c5 break, and we'll have to go for the king. We have to go for the throat. And we do so by making room for the pawn with the move knight d7. I have to say bishop d2 I'm not super familiar with in this structure. Now he can do b4, that's what I'm expecting. He doesn't need the preparatory rook b1 move because there is a pin. It's true that he could also play rook b1, it's not like it's a mistake. But yeah, knight d7 and then I'm ready to play f5 on the next move pretty much. Also expecting knight e1, typical idea to meet f5 with f3, just a classical way of handling the typical King's Indian play, but he goes queen c2. Okay, interesting. I'm not sure this is altogether so great for my opponent because I'm wondering, well, I can play f5, but am I in time to do something like knight dc5 with idea to play a4 and fix this square? Yeah, I'm afraid knight dc5, there's gonna be b3, so he's gonna slowly play rook b1, b4 and kick my knight, unless I can justify it by meeting b3 with a4, trying to sacrifice the pawn, and if b4, the point is knight b3 is interesting. Rook b1 and then maybe then knight d4. That's pretty complicated and unnecessary. I feel like we should probably just aim to make the simple move work, which is f5 and what I'm gonna ultimately play. Yeah, knight g5, I knew it's a thing. He wants to plant the knight on e6, but I was thinking knight c5. Yeah, just getting good control over e6 and threatening to kick the knight away should be an appropriate answer to that. Also notice that white is not in time with b4 anymore due to the poor placement of his queen, because after takes, in the past, the knight was frozen on a6 because of the pin, but this time we can actually move it because taking on b4 would come with a tempo hitting the poorly placed queen. So yeah, I mean, it looks like we get a very reasonable version of this. Knight on c5, threatening a4 also to fix this square, also stopping any knight e6 kind of funny business. Bishop e3, okay, a move of chess. I can play f4, that forces him, I would imagine, to take. But then he gets in b4, yeah, and he gets to push me away. I don't like that. So his threat is to somehow take and then do b4. So I want to watch out for that. Can we just do a4? I think the answer should be yes. Also, h6 tempo move should be considered. a4 is more like slower. You want to prioritize tempo move in your thinking process. So h6, it pretty much forces knight e6, I would imagine. Then we take, pawn takes, take with a bishop. We just end up collecting a pawn for free, so I don't see a reason why not to go for that. Sure, it becomes a little bit messy, but I mean, we are playing King's Indian at the end of the day. It's not like you expect to have a calm walk in the park every day. Okay, I mean, we might get one when he retreats with a knight. That's very polite of him, very respectful. And because he wants b4, that's really his only source of counterplay that's left on the board. So to kill all the fun, I'm gonna play a4. And notice how the queen on e8 is actually perfectly placed, protecting soft pawn on g6 while also protecting the pawn on a4. So that whenever he tries b4, I can easily en passant and stop all the queenside counterplay. And because it's a closed game, you need to guide your pieces based on a pawn break. And my opponent pretty much has no pawn breaks to play for, which is usually a sign that you have a bad position. So simply because we have obvious pawn play, black should be close to winning in this closed position. So what makes it a closed position is the fact that there are a lot of pawns on the board. To be more specific, all of them. And yeah, notice that this would have been, white's dream to play on the queen side, but he gets no moves and he's completely paralyzed. He's strategically lost. Only by a miracle, yeah, he would survive, but not really. We want to do this, but h5 loses the pawn. So for this reason, I think this queen once again beautifully joins the attack, preparing to push. Yeah, knight h2, but h5 should be a good move, I would imagine. He could try maybe queen d1, so you still want to watch out for tricks. Queen d1, attacking the pawn. Maybe there is g4, takes, sacrifice. I could also play knight b3. Just bank on the fact that, okay, the drawback of knight h2 is that it no longer covers this square. It's probably more clever to actually go for the Bobby Fischer knight rather than h5, since he had some kind of light square blockade ready. So knight b3 joining d4 square, as yeah, Fischer said, if you can get a knight on d4 in the King's Indian, you're gonna make at least a draw. So we'll try to blindly follow that advice and see what happens. He goes queen d1. Yeah, so he managed to win a pawn in the process. At least it's something to be optimistic about as white. Also, I was kind of thinking that there is queen e4, but now I realize bishop d3 traps my queen, which is kind of annoying. Yeah. Not very obvious, like he gets surprisingly decent control over the light squares. I kind of saw this coming, but it was hard to believe that it can be any good. I can also play knight c5 and just trade that knight, but doesn't feel right because we lose a little bit of the momentum. Okay, how do we do this? Bishop d7, knight c5. Oh man. Can I just go knight takes and then play h5 g4? Is it the time to give up on my Bobby Fischer knight? Yeah, I think I was too emotionally attached to it. This is, by the way, it could be typical mistake. I think taking is best move because it unlocks the pawn break. It unlocks the pawn play. But yeah, I was, so married to this knight on d4. No, stop trying to marry knights. Try to marry girls or, yeah, people. Ideally, marry people, not horses. If you can live with a lesson out of this King's Indian video, you saw that I was about to get married to a horse on d4. And, thanks to that, lose the game. Now that the pawn play has been, wow. Now that the pawn play is ongoing, my opponent can just resign. He's about to get mated. So, I mean, yeah. What can I say? I want to checkmate on h2, so the knight is only defender. Can take and play queen h7 or queen anywhere on the h file. And yeah, I don't think you're going to save that one. I'm sorry. I don't think there's a way to escape. And I'm actually curious, like, how was the objective evaluation in that position? Because knight d4, losing a pawn to eliminate the bishop. This may actually have been quite a good plan, but I sort of accidentally stumbled into it. Basically just using elimination method. So let's have a look. Okay, so we got only a 90 almost. Yeah, if we look at it with the computer, this was the position I was thinking about, and yeah, maybe queen g6 was not really necessary. It felt like a nice natural move. I played knight b3 going for the Fischer knight, and indeed, see, it was super important to actually give up on that knight. It's the only move that keeps an advantage for black. So I'm actually quite happy about that decision. Then you saw my opponent immediately collapsed. h5, g4 is coming. And the difference between black's position and white's position is that we have a pawn break to play for and white doesn't. Chess is pretty simple, especially in close positions, if you think about it that way. Figure out the pawn break, go for it, and yeah, you saw how easily we were able to win this game. So hope you guys enjoyed this game with the little sideline that I like to use. Ignore what the computer is saying. Queen 8 is actually a very interesting move, which was invented by the very talented junior from India, Raunak Sadhwani. And it's a very interesting way to cut the theory against White's most popular and most classical setup, the Mar del Plata. So with that being said, I think we can move on to the following game. All right, everybody. Back with another one of those King's Indian games. Or hopefully, I mean, we're going to see whether he plays London system or not. But seems like a d4, c4 aggressive mainline player. Rated 2000 from India. Okay, gonna King's Indian. We're not gonna be playing the Grunfeld. d5 would be the move leading to the Grunfeld. But we're gonna allow white to expand in the center with the move e4. And we're pretty much gonna be trying to play around that center for a little bit. Of course, this game could also take a more positional route in case opponent decides to play a system like the Fianchetto. But yeah, he could also play systems that involve the move onto e3 instead of the ultra aggressive e4. So bishop f4 usually will be combined with e3. I'm just gonna... You can play d6 or castle here. Yeah, I think I'm just gonna go d6 before castling. I think it's a pretty good habit to get yourself into. It can be useful sometimes. And yeah, he goes e4. e4, which is not a good combo with the bishop on f4. Whenever you're playing lines with e4, let's say black's main pawn break will be the move e5. And okay, in the e3 lines as well, but the difference is that compared to e3 lines, the d4 square is going to be much more vulnerable. And he's going to get hit by that in full speed. So yeah, I think for now, we are just going to be castling. And next up, we're very much looking for something like knight c6, e5 type of reaction. This is a very common mistake. Whenever you see players fully expand in the center, combine it with bishop f4. Yeah, that is not a good combo. Okay, knight f3. So we cannot go e5 right away because obviously opponent has a lot more pieces fighting for that. But we can go either knight c6 or bishop g4. Bishop g4 would be, let's say, the more casual way to play this. It's actually very rare that bishop g4 is a good move in the King's Indian, because most of the times you're just losing the bishop here for no reason. But in this case, it really makes sense since I highlighted the issue that the opponent has problems with the d4 square due to the poor placement of the bishop. So something like, let's say, bishop g4, h3, takes, knight c6 could lead to very good counterplay. For instance, d5, you could play knight d4. When queen d1 happens, there is a knight d7 type of move. But also knight c6 can be very strong because after d5, I'm really contemplating about a move like pawn to e5. Strong intermezzo. Yeah. Let's play bishop g4. I feel like, okay, the other one was stronger, but I just wanted to show how to play around the weak squares. Knight c6 is a more like a tactical variation. This one feels a bit more positional, and I find it potentially a little bit more instructive. Obviously, we are about to find out. So let's see. As I said, h3 not so critical. Bishop e2, something that I expect. And the plan would be knight goes to c6, takes, and then e5. Yeah. So okay, can I play knight c6 now? We have to figure out what is up with d5. On d5, you could obviously go back and then reroute and say that we provoke d5 and now knight c5 becomes an option. Because if you play knight d7 right away, that knight doesn't really have such a clear future. But with a pawn on d5, it can obviously jump. So that's why this whole business of provoking d5 makes sense. Okay. I think I'm gonna go for that, honestly. Knight of d7 could be another move. Preparing to meet h3 with takes, and then either e5 or knight c6. Yeah, I'm actually gonna go knight of d7. I find it very nice, pretty much doubling down on the idea that I mentioned in the beginning that bishop f4 is gonna be a target for e5. Okay, I'm pretty much sure that you can study this with the engine and look for what is the most precise continuation. But I'm just kind of navigating you through my thinking process, basically unfiltered. I don't really know the exact best continuations. I just know that this is not supposed to be a critical setup, and I'm trying to give you a bit of context for the options that are available. Opponent plays h3, yeah, so keeping the bishop is bad because of the g4 trap we have to take. And it's all about this d4 square, yeah? So we have two candidate moves, e5 or knight to c6. I would love to get developed, but d5, do we really have such a nice follow-up? Like, if we play knight e5, targeting bishop, targeting pawn, he can probably just go back. And I don't see a great follow-up. So, alternatively, can we play knight d4? That one I like a little bit better because it seems that we are winning the bishop. I don't think you can really keep the bishop with something like bishop g4. At the very least, a move like c5. And knight c6, bishop e3, then e5 regardless happens. So yeah, I'm gonna go knight c6. Remember, pressuring d4. He tries to hold on to the square. Well, he's not gonna have much of a choice after we play e5. And if they take, this is gonna be very interesting because we have a lot of options. I'd be tempted to say taking back with the pawn should be ideal because it's still reinforcing the same knight d4 idea. It truly is a lot about occupying that square with your knight. But he has played the move d5 instead, where yet again we have, I would say, two interesting options. So, first instinct, you want to go knight d4. Bobby Fischer once said that whenever he got the knight to d4, he will never lose. He will at least make a draw. So, yeah, we can maybe trust Bobby on that one. Not sure about other things, but on that one maybe. So, knight d4, the only scary thing is if he takes and then if he tries to win that pawn, let's say, with some knight b5 kind of move. Normally, you will get long-term compensation if even after losing that pawn because the bishop activates on the long diagonal. So currently, you can see that this guy is pretty passive, but remove the e5 pawn and it's a good piece. So we can play like knight c5, knight d4, rook e8, probably win back the pawn immediately, or play for compensation. Or we could also keep the game more closed and go for knight e7, castle, and then like f5. Yeah. Okay, I think I'm gonna go knight e7. I feel like knight d4 is objectively the best, but I want to show you some other ideas, assuming he plays normal. So, yeah. He could also do aggressive h4, which is maybe better. These are also moves he can play. But I would say people in this rating range just castle in this position. Pushing kingside pawns, especially these days, is pretty meta in various positions against the King's Indian, but yeah. Okay, so he goes queen d2. Now, f5 really comes to mind, threatening to trap the bishop. Another plan that I wanted to mention was that we can look for ways to trade our bad bishop. So imagine a typical maneuver in this structure is king h8, knight g8, and then bishop h6. Right now, that obviously loses a piece. But maybe you can sort of prepare it with queen h4 after, and then bishop h6. So once you trade the bishops, black is in great shape. I'm afraid though king h8 is a bit slow, and it gets charged with h4. So I'm just gonna play the standard King's Indian move, f5. And okay, he goes for the bishop trade. I'm more than happy to exchange that. The question is, do we lure his queen or do we keep the queen inside the castle? Because his queen could become a bit of a target. Yeah. Also maybe taking comes to mind. Yeah, let's just play f4. Let's close it down. Let's keep the queen where it is. And Basically, the argument is gonna be that he is left with a taller pawn on f3. The bishop, that is, pretty much gonna be restricted by its own pawns. What's very important to notice from a strategical point of view is that all the white pawns are on the same colors as his bishop. So the bishop is gonna be really restricted. I highly expect him to try to exchange it, maybe with a bishop g4 move, but I will try to maybe play around it with knight f6 or knight c5. I mean, even if he gets the trade, the position is still sensibly equal because white has more space on the queen side, but we have more space on the king side of the board to compensate for it. And okay, I mean, the position could be objectively equal, but I have a feeling that yeah, it should generally be a little bit easier to play as black because we have no bad pieces whatsoever. And no matter what side white castles, will try to attack him. So castle short probably fails under attack after knight f6, g5, h5, g4. And long castle is going to be met with some sort of knight c5, a5, a4. Yeah, maybe knight c8, knight b6. Or try to set up the b5 pawn break somehow. But on b4, yeah. Pause the video. I don't have much time on the clock, but pause the video. You have a great strategical exercise. Really important for a King's Indian player. Because we can undermine that pawn. White is unable to play the desired move a3 to keep the tension. And what this move accomplishes is that our knight is going to get access to the c5 square, while in the meantime also messing up the enemy pawn structure. So, very important. a5, it's the kind of move that you should be able to play in your sleep while blindfolded. So, e5, very important. I know, especially as a beginner, at first, you don't really have a vision developed for this kind of moves. It's more like, okay, what is he playing? How do I attack? Just was supposed to be fun. Why am I actually in so much pain while playing this game and I still do it? I get that. This may be recurring thoughts, but yeah, okay, you want to watch out for strategic ideas as well, especially pawn breaks. You always want to have a pawn break in mind while you're playing. So, since the position has now been completely frozen, I have a premium knight on c5, since it cannot be dislodged by any of white's pawns. Notice that these pawns have been already pushed to the max. I can still play b6. I could also keep that move in reserve in case I ever want to play c6 or in case I want to maybe transfer the knight to this square. Imagine if he gets a pawn to a4, that could be an idea. However, realistically, the only pawn break that I can play for is this one. And in order to support it, I feel like the knight maneuver is required. The knight on b6, it's a bit useless, I would say, once he defends. So probably I want to get a knight to f6, pressure e4, and then do this moves. I could also benefit from a queen on h4 on the side. Yeah, not sure about it, but feels like queen h4 doesn't hurt, so I'm just gonna play it. Just bringing more boys to the party, then knight f6, and then I just want to look for the pawn break. It's a closed position, so the only way that you're gonna realistically make progress is by having a pawn break. Also, now that I think about it, kind of dislike the queen on h4. I feel like it's kind of a nice little nuance, preparing g4 while not allowing him to take, while not allowing long castle because f2 is hanging in case of that. But another juicy idea that I see is after you get all these moves is that, okay, knight f6 now, very nice, targeting the bishop, targeting the pawn. He cannot play f3 because of the pin. And okay, he castles, he tries to bail out. Yeah. Takes on e4, takes on f2, fork incoming. Turns out the rumors about dropping the soap were right. Opponent is in big trouble. Knight f2 winning a rook. Queen f2 playing for mate. Jesus. How do we pick the best? Knight f4. Funny, but not a good move. He tried to use the pin, but I can just get rid of the knight. The knight is pinned, and now I'm going for the fork. Okay, opponent is just going in full mental breakdown. Alright, now we are collecting big. Big cash in. How on earth, in like 3 moves, all of his pieces have literally disappeared from the board? That was supposed to be some kind of magic that just happened. Like, seriously. Move 19. Kind of complicated position. And also, by the way, I could have taken a free pawn that I missed. 5 moves later. Opponent's king, butt naked. No pieces remaining. That is just the beauty of the King's India, ladies and gentlemen. Now, the only thing that I have in mind was whether Queen h4 was required or not. Yeah, so the computer apparently likes it. What I was having second thoughts is that knight f6, h5, g5, I started realizing that the pawn on e4 could be a target, and maybe I want to use the queen this way via e8 and then g6. So let's imagine some random moves happen. Whatever, h5, let's just say whatever move. And then I was thinking about this idea to bring the queen. But my queen on h4 was also having a lot of concrete benefits. Like, for instance, the f3 move that keeps the position together wasn't possible. And yeah, just one last detail before we wrap this one up. Another idea when, let's say, your opponent's queen side is fixed like that, the queen can also be used via this diagonal. Let's imagine white had played some kind of, okay, let's just say we do random move, white played f3, random move, and white castles. Now, obviously, you can just go for the attack, but in some scenarios, you don't have that much control, and the queen squeezing over this diagonal after queen b8 could be incredibly annoying. So, yeah. Honestly, queen b8 to a7, maybe one of my favorite ideas all time in the King's Indian, when it's a good move. So, with that being said, I think we can move on to the following game. Alright, everybody, back with another black game. Almost 2100 rated opponent. Is that like Dark Vader that we're playing or something? Seems to be very scary. Okay. He goes knight f3. This is most likely, okay, it starts as a reti, but it will go into a normal King's Indian most likely. So one of the perks of playing the King's Indian is that additionally, by default, you have a repertoire against both English opening and the reti, apart from the standard 1d4 move. So it's kind of like the Turkish all-inclusive on many different levels. So yeah, knight c3, I'm gonna go with d6 and then castle. Let's see, he decides to play full pawn center. He could also play with e3. That's the more like cautious setup, which I recommend you to meet by double fianchetto when you see pawn on e3. But the situation is okay, different when he goes ambitious. So we start with castle, and now many ways of playing. h3, bishop e2 are the main moves. These are 2 continuations. Okay, he could also do some randomness like bishop e3 or bishop g5. Those would be, you know, additional developing moves. But yeah, just keep in mind the move like e5, just, okay, it's not how chess works in these positions, because white's center will be crumbling apart after like de. You cannot take with a pawn, because the endgame after trade and then knight g4, you're very likely losing e5. And if you take and then he takes with the knight, we can very likely undermine the center with c5, and this bishop is going to be a monster. And we're going to be able to like regain that pawn easily. If he goes for dc, you have at least queen c7 as a move, or even the endgame. But okay, he plays bishop to e2. Mar del Plata. This is yeah, the richest variation possible against the King's Indian. So e5 is possible. It's the main line. Knight a6, it's also possible. Should we play this? This is yeah, currently I would say my favorite. In terms of objectiveness, it's probably the best line objectively. But yeah, I'm just gonna keep it still interesting. I'm gonna go for my pet line. I really like this queen e8 move, preparing the e5 push. And let's see if my opponent is gonna like keep playing normal or now he'll start getting creative, because most of the white players are gonna castle. No question about it. It's proven by the stats. Or yeah, okay, bishop e3 also possible. I was about to say that is the alternative. And now we play e5. He can take or he can push. He decides to go for the push. Now, important against the take. If we were to recap, that allows bishop c5, trapping the rook. So it's important that on DE there is this nice intermezzo with knight g4. The problem for white is that ED allows knight takes on e3. And then you get double pawns. Pretty much totally messed up structure, while black also has the bishop pair, and that is gonna fully compensate for the sacrificed pawn. And d5. Okay, after d5, knight g4, then you recapture on e5 with a knight. And those positions are quite, okay, interesting to play. It's still new territory. Not many games have happened from this position since queen e8 is very new. It's very fresh stuff. Plays d5, and now if you give white time, they would love to play a knight d2 and get like a perfect Petrosian setup. I think that's what it's called. So knight d2, preparing then to, let's say, meet the typical King's Indian move like knight d7, wanting to go f5. The problem is that they're in time with g4. And you know, if you try f5, they have gf, gf, the g file gets opened, it becomes very dangerous. So you shouldn't let him play knight d2, you start knight g4 and then f5. That's how you get the quick, typical King's Indian play. And my opponent is playing super fast. Okay, it's a very rare variation, but he's very fast, okay. Well, he's not challenging the knight, so I'm not really planning to move it. Thinking whether to play knight a6 or a5, probably. a5 with the idea to go knight c5 without allowing any b4 in the future. It's a very nice typical move to take control over the queenside dark squares. Also, discouraging white's typical pawn push, because the way we have this typical King's Indian pawn structure, our pawns are pointing towards that direction. This is our side of focus, and white's side of focus is like this. So, okay, to clarify, white wants to play in the blue triangle, and you do it with b4 kind of push, and then c5. Which we have managed to stop, thanks to this a5. Okay, my opponent plays h3. I don't have much of a choice rather than retreating with a knight. Knight f2 could be a thematic sacrifice, but I don't have any follow-up. So, just gonna go back, creating an additional pressure on e4. In case of takes, we have a very interesting choice, actually. Because the thematic way would be to always recap with the pawn and just control all the central squares. But it could be very interesting to take back with a bishop due to the tempo against white's queen. So I'm not entirely sure which one should we go for. Also, another idea to keep in mind that can be surprising and very strong is that after ef, maybe e4 in some positions with some quick e3 combo. Like hit the knight and then hit the bishop and you sacrifice a pawn and then your pieces start opening up in typical King's Indian fashion. Yeah, To be honest, my instinct tells me that taking with the bishop is probably best, exploiting the poor position of white's queen, and then we get knight a6, knight c5, or some simple development. Okay, it's for the first time in the game that my opponent is thinking for a little bit. So let's see what he's gonna come up with. Okay, bishop e3. How is that solving the e4 problem? It's not. Can I take? I'm wondering, can we? So let's say if I take twice, he takes with the queen, I have bishop f5 and then only move queen h4. So the queen escapes. I have e4 move to attack the knight and b2 pawn, but then he's in time with knight d4 and I don't see a follow-up. So perhaps instead of taking, I should just play normal developing move, knight a6. I could have also considered f4, but I can always pretty much lock the position. So I'm just gonna keep the tension for a little bit. I would be more inclined to go f4 in case I see the king committing. If the king goes there, we know we're going for the witch hunt. If the king wants to escape queenside, then I may want to take and use the bishop to attack via this diagonal. Okay, a3 though. Just prophylactic move, stopping knight b4. And now, yeah, it's time to develop the bishop finally, yeah? There is simple bishop d7 move and just kind of passing the turn, maybe threatening to fix him with a4. But it's also an argument to be made, okay, what if we start taking now and then bishop f5? Yeah, then pretty much same queen h4 story. So I would just play bishop d7 and I'd like to see what he has in mind, because it's much more difficult to play this position as white. Please keep in mind that a move like knight d2, trying to play the okay, how to say it, the thematic reply on the kingside storm, you're simply not gonna be in time, because knight d2, then the bishop gets trapped with f4. So if white had two moves, they would love to play knight d2 and then f3 and solidify the pawn center. But yeah, it's not gonna happen. And yeah, as black, we pretty much have all the pieces on their natural squares, and my opponent finally decides to release the tension. Now I have yet again a bit of a difficult but pleasant choice. I would say generally, yeah, okay. Strategically, you wanna get used of these two pawns together in the King's Indian, controlling all the important squares. It's true that if white is, let's say, a mastermind, in some occasions, these pawns can become a little bit weak. But yeah, it's just very difficult to play against them, honestly. So in let's say intermediate level games, the strength of these pawns, I would estimate it's even more telling than usual. So okay, one key rule though that you want to watch out for: you should be very cautious with pushing. So these pawns, they are very good while they are like this next to the other, because if you go e4, you're weakening a lot of squares. Like e4, then gonna get knight d4 maybe. How about f4? He has only one move. This would be great if we would be in time with the bishop, but how about f4? Bishop back and then e4. So the knight has to move. Let's imagine knight d4, but then pawn to e3. I mean, we get a lot of tempi moves. That's encouraging whenever it happens. Could also play a4. Yeah, I could also wait. There's no rush. I would like to play knight c5, but I don't want to give him idea to take and then maybe make a mess. So I'm gonna start b6, perhaps. Knight c5 with idea to take back with a b pawn. So I'm still pretty much waiting. It's a much easier position to play as black. I have many useful moves left, so I didn't see a reason to commit. And yeah, he tries to go after this pawn. Risky strategy. Okay, I mean, guess it's possible, but at the very least I have tempo move and then knight c5. So yeah, I think we have to go for that. Just keeping the momentum. And it's important that I don't want to let white create a bind on the light squares onto this diagonal. So I'm going to play knight c5. Happy to meet bishop d3 with takes. Or perhaps bishop d3 even, yeah, e4 could be considered. And after all this journey, it feels that the knight on h4 is a little bit misplaced. And yeah, okay, next up, we might be able to simply play for something like a4 and then knight b3, knight to d4. Reroute the knight. Or, yeah, we could also look for ways to maybe prepare the e4 push without hanging the f4 pawn. I don't know exactly how that is gonna be done, but it's a plan. So, okay, let's see also what he's gonna play. It's quite often that our decision is gonna be easier once we see his move. Yeah, g3, threatening to take. Honestly, I'm not afraid of that because it's opening up the bishop. So maybe it's a good time to play king h8, avoiding any rook activity. Yeah, going for it. I think it's, well, it's really kind of our opponent is helping us. Now the bishop is open, the queen is active, the knight is scattered. Yeah, he shouldn't be taking. He should play at least some rook e1 move. Yeah, at least this. Yeah, okay. He shows some understanding of the position. So, yeah, I kind of want to sidestep that annoying rook. And I'm thinking to just move the queen to f7. Have, yeah, some ideas of a discovery. If bishop f4, maybe simply knight e4. Planning to take with the queen on f4 with a check. And if opponent doesn't do anything, well, what are we gonna do? Maybe just bring rook to the open file and then set up knight e4. If we manage to get like a good version of knight e4, it's in great shape, but this b4, yeah, it can hardly be a good move. Thanks for activating my rook. That's very kind. Man, that was not a good decision by him. Yeah, okay, now knight e4 should actually be the cherry on top of the cake. Also, simple move, knight e4 is like good enough, but knight e4 because we have strong intermezzo. We'll have rook a1 check. So as I told you like a second ago, if we can get knight e4, it's a winning position. Well, opponent found a perfect way to allow it, and yeah, king b2. You can try to pause the video and look for ways to exploit the pin along the long diag. Okay, hint, you wanna remove the defender. Now you see the knight is pinned. So the move is gonna be knight e4 next after the queen recaptures. Okay, we don't have that much time on the clock left, but with an extra piece and the king being completely naked, should be in decent shape. Plays bishop d3, wow. That's creative. Knight e4, takes. Wow, maybe not so easy. Not as easy as I imagined initially. Okay, queen h5. Tag this knight and threatening to play knight f3. 28 seconds left only. If knight f5, we have cute idea knight c4. Because the bishop is overloaded. Okay, gonna use it. Bishop had to defend two things. Gonna take with the bishop, so keeping queens on the board, hoping for an attack. Knight e4 is a threat. Yeah, I said knight e4 is a threat. Now he has to take with a rook because of the pin. Okay, taking. Maybe looking for queen e5. Okay, that's a free rook that I'm definitely gonna be cashing in. Oh man, what a payday. Big payday. Okay, damn it. I'm gonna go for the endgame. 20 seconds left. Need to do some pre-moving. He refuses the endgame, but I can take everything. Okay, I just need to pre-move this. As long as I keep pre-moving and I keep taking his pieces, we should be in a very decent conversion spot, despite the time scramble. But, okay. Damn it, that was annoying. Bishop there was sneaky. Okay. Don't stalemate this bozo. Okay. And he resigned. Wow. All right. Really had to do a little bit of footwork at the end with the pre-moves, but yeah, no, the game felt like it was always kind of under control. All right, everybody. We have completed the first part of the video dedicated to the classical King's Indian plans. More specifically, the e5 push, and we're gonna be finishing the video by giving you a backup in case you feel like the e5 plan is not working so well for whatever concrete reason you may have in your game. Then it's probably a very good idea to go for the c5 move. This is gonna be the topic of the next game. Let's dive right into the action. Holy smokes, we're actually facing a 2100 opponent from what appears to be Greece. Yes, we're facing an opponent from Greece that goes d4, c4. All right, mainline stuff. Just gonna be going for the King's Indian, and yeah, let's see what Greek people are up to aside from vacation. So d6, preparing to castle, and the opponent decides to go for the knight e2 setup. That's actually fairly interesting. I believe this is the so-called Capengut system. That is just the name of it. And the idea is to really discourage one of black's main sources of counterplay, which is after, let's say, castle, knight g3, e5, d5. Normally, black wants to move the knight back and then push f5. But the knight from g3 is really pressuring that square, making the f5 break much difficult to achieve altogether. This is pretty much what this whole line is about. But it's vulnerable to different things, which is gonna be why you need to be pretty versatile to become a fully successful King's Indian player. Because the knight is very cleverly placed. If you had only one idea in the back of your mind to treat the King's Indian. But what we can do instead of that, we can make the transition to either a Benoni structure, which involves the c5 break, or in general, what I'm even a bigger fan of, the Benko Gambit ideas, which is going to involve a pawn sacrifice. Now, I'm trying to remember whether it's useful to start with h5 first and then transition into the Benko. Yeah, I think h5 is a good move to get started with. Yeah, h5 here, probably seeing bishop g5, or I can even just play a6. Let me do a6. I cannot really fully recall whether h5 is the right move. I know I looked at this position with the computer recently and can remember h5 is good there. But I'm just gonna play the c5, b5. I actually had a game like this in the past as well. So, okay, c5, threatening to take, very likely to see the pawn push, and now b5. This is the key move. And notice that I started with a6 and then b5. Because if you're doing it the other way, like most people would, a6, it's kind of screaming that you want to go b5, which gives your opponent time to play a4 and completely stop it. So after a6, notice that he's not in time. This really comes as a combo. c5, tempo move, and now b5 right away. he's never in time to stop the idea. So we play b5, and basically we are trying to play a Benko gambit where the knight from g3 is meant to be placed on f3. And it's just a worse piece now on g3, making this a much better version of the Benko gambit. Now, you may be concerned about the fact that you don't have much experience playing the Benko or stuff like that. Well, you don't really need to know much theory in the Benko, to be honest. You just need to know how to develop the pieces. It's pretty intuitive. Yeah, in a nutshell, we're just gonna be playing for compensation with these open files. I'm thinking whether to take. Could also play like a queen a5 kind of move. Not super sure about that since it's inviting bishop d2. I could also throw in h5, which I kind of want. I'm gonna do h5 because on bishop g5, I think that will enable queen a5. It will make it even stronger. Because once the bishop commits to g5, he's not gonna go there. And h4, I'm pretty happy to see, considering that he's gonna castle short most likely. That pawn could be weak. And okay, it's between taking or queen b6 right now. Queen b6, I'm a bit afraid, maybe like a4. So I think I'm just gonna take. If bishop takes, bishop a6, I think the bishop trade is fine. It's usually what we go for in the Benko. And this knight goes to d7. Queen goes to b6. Okay, he took. That helps us a little bit. Standard play would be to take with the rook and then go knight d7, but this also raises the question whether taking with the knight could be interesting. The knight on d7 is a pretty well placed piece generally because it's also stopping e5. So I think I'm gonna take with the rook and play knight d7 and then we basically decide. So far we're still in the introductory territory. And notice that already a move like f4 immediately backfires after knight g4. And we get a knight that lives on a powerful square forever. And for that reason, he plays f3. He plays it more solid. But the knight on g3 really strikes me as a not great piece for our opponent to have in the Benko. And the queen could go to b6. That's like the normal square. However, because we already got in the rook a6 move with tempo, I could also consider queen a8 as an additional thing. Also, one typical maneuver to get the party going in this structure is you play queen b6, this rook goes to b8, and then the knight from f6 maneuvers. You're gonna get a knight to e8, c7, and then b5. Getting rid of that knight, which is pretty much the gatekeeper of the queen side. So yeah, I think I'm gonna do queen b6. I'm just gonna play it very standard. Queen b6, keeping an eye on this pawn, making sure that the bishop cannot develop so easily. Expecting a queen move. One of those two squares. Knight h1 is a creative way to try and solve the problem of the knight. It's possible, but it's just kind of emphasizing why we get an improved Benko against the Kapenguts. And alright, I can either play rook b8, which is a nice move in general, but it doesn't come with a tempo, or I can play knight e8. Knight f2, knight c7, and then knight b5, very next move. Yeah, I'm gonna go for that. I'm prioritizing knight b7 because, yeah, who knows, maybe the rook, I could use it to go directly into a8. So, might save a tempo. This is really eye-opening maneuver, very important for the Benko. Knight e8, knight c7, knight b5 all together. And I don't think he's in time with a4. If he tries a4, one idea to always watch out for is rook b8 and then queen b3. Because despite being down a pawn, the Benko structure is very unique in a way that the trade of queens is actually beneficial for us, despite the material deficit. Because we're gonna get to put more pressure on the enemy queen side in general. So, queen e2. Stopping my knight b5, so maybe I'm just playing rook b8, also stopping the bishop from developing and preparing knight b5. reinforcing that idea. So g3, knight b5, and now notice if we trade everything, I think, yeah, we're gonna be maybe slightly better already. If opponent gives me the endgame, as I said, we're gonna be slightly better. We're very happy. Now, huge threat of bishop b2, expecting knight d3, but then, you know, you have to watch out for c4. And also, you cannot really protect the b2 pawn with rook b1 because that hangs a2. So we, yeah, basically get to unleash quite a perfect setup in the Benko. That's exciting. Let's see if I'm gonna be able to convert it. Normally, the way this goes, black might end up winning these two pawns, and we'll be having an extra pawn on c5. Funnily though, I've seen many games where black ends up trading the c5 pawn for these two pawns, and then because of how much activity there is on the queen side, still manages to win the endgame with even pawns, which is kind of crazy if you ask me. a4, not really such a scary move, because that is pinned, but I have rook b3. Simple move. I have also rook b4, attacking the pawn. Yeah, going for it. I'll just have to try to shut my mouth basically and speed up a little bit. The part with shutting the mouth is gonna be the most difficult, but let's try to manage it. I don't want to spoil this game. This actually could potentially turn out very instructive. I'm not taking, yet again, the most theoretical route possible. I'm just pretty much playing on general grounds only. I do have a game in this structure though, I'll give you that. I played this opening, I think once in competitive chess in 2016 in my first European Junior Championship with black. That was completely winning, but I lost. Okay, bishop g5. King f8 is like simple move to defend. Yeah, I'm gonna go for it. Still, opponent has many things to deal with. Yeah, by the way, I should have played this move way faster. I almost spent 30 seconds on it. Man, time flies when you're recording a video. Who would have thought? Okay, that's not a good move. It allows bishop b2, intermezzo, and then pick up. So gonna be extra pawn, as I said. We're winning both a, b, and we keep the c pawn. Just gotta watch out for knight d3, but I can always unpin with a check. I mean, unpin is a weird way to say it, but you get what I mean. Rook a2, maybe just take like this. If check, I can go bishop back. I can also play king e8. Yeah, trade, and then I think we're happy with a rook trade, honestly. Getting it down into a minor piece endgame should make the conversion a little bit easier. Okay, I'm just gonna avoid that while getting a tempo. I could play c4. Yeah, the pawn speeds up. Maybe I want to get a knight trade. I feel like the knight trade is good because the knight is best blockading piece. So I'm trying to exchange his knight so that he's not gonna have such a good blocker for the c pawn. It's not easy for white, honestly, to keep because knight f4 is a weird place for the knight as it doesn't have a follow-up. And trade, I think I just play simple move, take with a bishop. Yeah, taking with a pawn. I guess maybe possible, but unnecessary. Just like this. Also rook a2. I could have maybe played that move. I could also do it now. I think it's a nice finesse that I'm gonna do just to force his king onto a more passive square before we take, because he doesn't have rook f2. So takes f4. Is there any weird counterplay that I need to be worried of? Bishop d4, f5, king g7. Oh no, that loses the e7 pawn. f5, I have to play king e8. Takes, and no more counterplay, I think. So I'm gonna go for it. f4, bishop there, simply. Check, maybe just king e8. Okay, rook b1, but the pawn can start flying. Have you ever seen a flying c pawn? Okay. f6 could also be a move and just hide on f7. He's basically trying to get the rook behind. So it could be clever to get something like this, which I'm gonna do. It's a bit weird, but yeah, could be clever, but I just realized my move doesn't make sense. But he helped me. Okay, technique gets a little bit bad right now, but I'll explain it after. He could have gotten his rook to c8, not the way he's doing it right now. Obviously, this is just nonsense what he's doing. Okay, rook f7, but I think I can play for the pawn push. Yeah, c4, c3. Bishop g5, I have king e8. Target and protect. And I think I'm gonna win his bishop. Looks to be most likely outcome. Yeah. I mean, I'm kind of mad a little bit at the technique, but really with not so much time on the clock, this is fine. Okay, hope you don't mind the technique. But the middle game part about this game was really important because we just got effortless winning position. So just rook a8 now, I think. I mean rook a1. Promote. We're gonna see f4. I play bishop d4. We might even get to promote full queen. Okay, yeah, I'm gonna attempt to promote full queen. So I'm gonna do bishop d4. He's gonna go over there. Then I'm gonna do like rook e1. Yeah, can I play rook e1 now? That is bishop e3 to get a full queen. Yeah, the whole argument is that the rook doesn't have the c file. And it can really speed up the process. Wait, so if I do bishop e3, he trades and then he has rook a1. Okay. I'm gonna try to keep it simple and promote. Damn, 20 seconds left. Okay. Gonna be a race against the clock. Okay, no talking, just playing. Should have done that a while ago. He can check me, I don't mind. Yeah, not sure if he has rook d7. Oh, I forgot about that pawn move. Getting so much counterplay. King g2 is a good move. Okay, he's in trouble now. There is rook g3 looming. Wait, what? What is he doing? Oh man. This is so heartbreaking that I'm not gonna be able to win it. Come on, dude. Yeah, that game still hurts pretty badly, but despite the fact that I was not able to convert it in time, I still find it very instructive how the pieces were maneuvered in the Benko structure. And just to kind of break down a little bit the endgame part of what I was supposed to do, um, okay, it was more or less a split second decision. It was better than to win the free piece to enter this end game, which I was actually calculating. I visualized this position in my head. It's just that I couldn't simply evaluate how fast can I win this considering the fact that I will have only like 20 seconds left. So not only that, you have to evaluate the position while making such a decision, but you have to sort of evaluate how easy it's going to be to make pre-moves to survive with little time on the clock. So yeah, pretty much I just flipped a coin and I decided to take the piece. But this was obviously way easier to convert because white is stuck and you have a very simple plan of bringing the king to the rook, leading to an effortless win. So yeah, thanks a lot for really watching so much of this video. In case you want to learn more King's Indian, you can probably click on this thing that will appear on the screen. And yeah, I'll see you around on the channel. Have a good one.